Today I want to talk with you about Sibo, which stands for Small Intestinal Bacterial Overgrowth Syndrome. Well, what in the world is Sibo? Let me start off by asking sort of a bizarre question. I'm quite certain that none of you have a bathroom in your kitchen. Similarly, you don't have a garage in your dining room. Why? Because there's a place for everything, and things work better when everything is in its place. With Sibo, what happens is that bacteria that normally belong in the large intestine migrate north and find their way into the small intestine where they don't belong, either in terms of their absolute number, so they may not be alien to the small intestine, but they show up and proliferate in very, very high numbers. Or you can actually have an invasion of bacteria that don't belong in the small intestine. They belong in the large intestine. They can find their way into the small intestine where they disrupt the function of the small intestine as part of the overall process of digestion. When that happens, the efficiency and the effectiveness of digestion is thrown off. You can also have significant secondary effects where those bacteria, after disrupting what's supposed to be happening in the small intestine, can also begin to impact the lining of the small intestine, breaking down the protective barrier that's usually there, and allowing those bacteria to begin to gain entry across the small intestine lining into the bloodstream, and from there into the body as a whole. So briefly, what we're saying is that when the wrong bacteria in type or in number begin to proliferate in the small intestine, they can not only disrupt the digestive process that's supposed to be happening there, but can migrate into the body and cause all sorts of secondary effects throughout the body, up to and including the brain, where it can set off all sorts of inflammatory reactions that then affect other parts of the body. It can show up in terms of clouded thinking, learning and memory difficulties. It can show up behaviorally with disrupted sleep patterns, changes in energy level. It can show up emotionally with heightened anxiety or a worsening of depressive difficulties. And it can certainly show up in terms of the usual array of digestive difficulties that people with Sibo and other comorbid conditions know so well. Things like bloating and pain, alterations in normal bowel functioning, typically with diarrhea, although sometimes you can also have significant constipation. You can have gassiness. You can have all sorts of nutritional deficiencies, because if the small intestine isn't delivering into the bloodstream the nutrients in a clean and effective way, you can have problems with the ability of the small intestine to transmit or to allow passage of appropriate nutrients into the bloodstream, creating nutritional deficiencies that also have negative consequences. So as you can tell, that kind of a process is very disruptive. One of the frustrations is that when it's treated, and it's usually treated with antibiotics in order to reduce the bacterial overgrowth, you can get good symptom relief for a few months, some people up to half a year, maybe a little bit longer, but 25% up to 50% of people who undergo that kind of antibacterial treatment end up getting a recurrence of that bacterial overgrowth within a year. So it can turn into a persistent, into a chronic condition that has all of the effects that I mentioned earlier, and really reduces not only physical health, but overall quality of life. Let's talk a little bit about what it is that can set us up to develop SIBO. What we have to recognize, and frankly why it is that I emphasize so much a lifestyle medicine point of view, in other words, not just which supplement or which medication is going to be the ticket that helps you feel better, but what are the changes that you can make in your overall lifestyle, what I call your diatia, which is an ancient Greek word that means not only diet, but the overall way in which we live, our lifestyle. That's why I think it's so important to focus on lifestyle medicine and not go after narrow or simple silver bullets. So let's talk together a little bit about what can set us up for SIBO. We have to recognize that there is really nothing inside of us and nothing around us that exists completely as an island. Within moments of birth, we're already being colonized by bacteria that we pick up in the birth canal. That may sound gross, but frankly, we need that bacteria to set up house inside of us to help us with digestion. There are things that the bacteria can do that our own digestive system is not able to do. We coexist. We're a living, coordinated, integrated ecosystem. So the idea that we have this bacteria is not the problem. It's when the bacteria don't coexist inside of us in the way that they are supposed to. And what makes that most likely to happen? Here are some of the things that can set us up for SIBO. A common problem is the overuse of antibiotics on a chronic, sometimes years-long basis. In doing so, we're inadvertently killing off a lot of the good bacteria, and those bacteria that survive become more and more resistant to future antibiotic use and can therefore get established and proliferate in ways that are not healthy. The body also has a normal defense of having a high acid environment. A certain pH level in the gut is tuned to kill off bacteria that can't survive in that high acid state. So if we're using PPIs, protein pump inhibitors, or other antacids, they can reduce the acidity of the gut to levels that are too low, and again, that allows certain bacteria that we don't want to gain a foothold to do exactly that. So use of those kind of medications or other antacids, over-the-counter antacids, over time can have the effect of increasing the odds that we can develop SIBO. There are other conditions that slow down the rate at which food moves through the small intestine, and in so doing, because the food is moving slowly, it can ferment. The bacteria have a longer amount of time to go after it, to begin to break it down, but some of that breakdown process is happening where it doesn't belong, and it allows the normal proportion of bacteria to get out of balance, and we can have an overgrowth of that bacteria inside the gut. So watching things that slow down the rate of what we call motility, gut motility, is another way in which SIBO can get established. Surprisingly, and again why me, a psychologist, is involved in things like this, is that chronic worry, high anxiety has potentially, for many, many people, the effect of slowing down the gut, and in that way making it more likely that SIBO can develop. Yet another way is that as the lining of the gut, if there is some sort of underlying immune dysfunction and it is not operating as it should, it's not protecting the walls of the intestine, if the immune cells are not identifying and attacking bacteria before they get out of control, those bacteria can begin to multiply, proliferate, and not only gain a foothold inside the gut, but as we said earlier, they can begin to affect the lining of the gut and potentially make their way through, creating what is known as leaky gut syndrome, where those bacteria can begin to create a pathway into the body proper, thereby setting up a significant inflammatory cascade throughout the rest of the body, and is associated with some of the more significant illness patterns that we see with people affected with Sibo. Those are just some of the ways in which we can set ourselves up for developing a Sibo infestation. So given all of that, what is there to do? Well, let's talk about that for a few minutes. Earlier, I talked about how nothing exists as an island. We're always operating, functioning, living in a check and balance system. Not only all the check and balance systems that exist inside of us, but how we as an organism exist in a check and balance system with what's happening around us. Which brings me right back to the idea of lifestyle medicine. Here are some of the very common things and useful things that you can do to decrease the odds of developing Sibo, or things that you can do to reduce the degree to which Sibo becomes a problem for you. One of the fundamental things that you can do involves nutritional and dietary changes. The more that you are eating foods that are fitting, that fit well with your body type, that fit well with the season of the year, that fit well with your energy needs, a good balance of appropriate and healthy carbs, appropriate lean proteins, and healthy fats. Not something that's new to you, but that kind of dietary management, emphasizing whole foods as much as possible. Or, as I like to say, keeping the number of steps between the sun and your mouth as small as possible. So we're not processing foods, we're not refining foods, we're not doing all of these different things that create all these steps between what the sun helps grow and what we ultimately harvest and eat. The fewer those steps, the more the food is whole, nutritious, healthier, and works in partnership with healthier bacteria to keep the nasty bacteria numbers way down. Nutrition and diet seems like a no-brainer. Another thing that you can do, though, is make sure that you're getting really good restorative sleep. Sleep is incredibly important when it comes to balancing your digestive functioning. I'll perhaps go into that in another vlog, but pay attention to how you sleep. As much as possible, begin to wind down so that your body begins to resynchronize with the light and dark cycle of a 24-hour day. In other words, pattern yourself so that when the sun is coming up, you're also getting up, and as the sun is winding down, as the sun is setting, beginning to slow your day down, beginning to reduce your pace, beginning to turn off extra electronics or the habit of working late into the night, so that your body, which is very sensitive to light-dark cycles, is ready for sleep at the end of the day. If you're having difficulty with insomnia, or if you show sleep disorders that are called parasomnias, sleepwalking is an example, then you need to contact someone who can help bring that under control, because if your sleep cycle is off, your digestive system is going to have a really hard time functioning well. Another thing that you can do is pay attention to the pace of your days. You want to, as much as possible, avoid this constant rush, worry, obsessive rumination that has you going from thing to thing to thing in a sometimes mindless state, rushing around. The bodily effect of that kind of mental attitude and lifestyle pace is to actively suppress efficient and effective digestive functioning. So learning to pace yourself, to attend to one thing at a time, finish something before you go on to the next, as much as possible, limit distractions, so that you're reducing this pell-mell rushed lifestyle that so many people live, that really reduces the effectiveness and efficiency of healthy digestive functioning. Yet another thing that you can do that has an indirect benefit to reduce the odds of Sibo is pay careful attention to psychological factors in your day-to-day life. What are the stressors that you're dealing with? Stressors that we generate inside of ourselves. I'm worried I won't get the promotion, or I'm worried I'm going to lose my job, or I'm worried about this or worried about that. You need to learn how to develop more effective coping strategies. For many of the people that I work with that have digestive difficulties, the stressors are in their primary relationships or in their family systems. Worries about a spouse, worries about children, children worried about their parents. Developing ways of managing those stressors is really critically important, not only for the quality of your own life, but for the topic that we're talking about today, involving keeping conditions like Sibo under as good a control as we can obtain. And finally, I would say it's important to pay attention to movement. We are designed to move. We often live very, very sedentary lives, and that sedentariness can decondition not only our physical functioning, it can also decondition our mind. It's harder to focus and pay attention. Our thought process can be slowed, and we can develop, surprisingly, an appetite for the kinds of foods that reinforce that sedentariness. We can notice that with diminished motivation. We say, oh, what the heck, I'll go ahead and eat things that we know we shouldn't be eating. So indirectly, by making sure that you maintain good activity levels, good exercise levels, that you make moving your body a part of your day-to-day life, you're actually helping to tone the way in which the digestive system functions, and can be an indirect way of making sure that for you, Sibo is not something that develops or doesn't develop into a significant and chronic health problem. I hope today I've been able to give you some new perspectives on this condition and what you can do to prevent it in your day-to-day life. I look forward to talking with you again soon. Stay tuned, and if you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to drop me a line. I'll do my very best to respond to you as quickly as I can. Bye-bye.